People are trying to hear the zebras. They desperately want the hoofbeats to be zebras, and I'm here to tell you it's a horse, man. Like, it's absolutely a horse. I get it. It's the preseason. You're bored. Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and you can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I'm joined, as always, by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT, how are we doing? Happy Monday episode. We're recording this on a Sunday. How are you?
I'm good. A lot of sports things happening in the Tennessee world. For Nashville specifically, Titans get their first W since last November. So
preseason wins or wins. Sure.
Something's a win, right? Like, I mean, gotta feel good about that, I guess. Kind of, actually, maybe. Not really. And then, of course, Nashville SC with the heartbreaking loss.
What a game, though! I don't know if you did you catch any of it?
I watched basically all of it because I was driving and my my YouTube TV wasn't working, because it was thinking I was in a different area code, so I couldn't even watch the Tennessee Titans game if I wanted to. So I stuck with the Nashville SC last night.
I didn't watch the Titans game last night live either. I was catching bits and pieces of it, following it all on Twitter, obviously, and doing my job that way. But I had to watch the replay today, which at the time of the game last night when it was live, I was glad that I wasn't having to watch it live. From what I was hearing, that it was just kind of peak preseason boredom. And then I was disappointed today when I was like, I have to go back and watch this. I did, and it sure was a preseason game. That was a game, and we're going to talk all about it today. And there was more to take away from it than just the fact that it was kind of a tough watch, and certainly a peak preseason watch. You got to really be sick in the head to find that entertaining. Luckily, we are. And those of you that are joining us live, you are in for a full episode's worth of breaking down what exactly went on, and a lot of Mike Vrabel from today's press conference from Titans headquarters, where I was there to ask him some questions about what he thought about last night's game. And he gave some of his thoughts on some of the players and some of the things that we saw happen last night. First of all, I do want to address the Nashville SC game. And by the way, those of you that are with us live on Sunday, appreciate you being here. Do me a favor, make sure you're over on the Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. That's where you're going to find this live stream and be able to comment like our guys D-Good and Pretty Boy and Volcano all over there in the chat. Appreciate you guys being with us. If you could also do me a huge favor, huge personal favor, just retweet, share, repost, whatever you can do to help us amplify this feed right now while we're live. That would be super helpful. So please do that for us, and I would appreciate it if you wouldn't be so kind as to do that. I see that D-Good in the comments here says that he has to apologize to you for the month of June. D-Good, why? Why?
Probably because the Mets are closer to a wild card spot right now than the Yankees are. So,
the world's lowest bar. I mean, I don't. Man.
Hey, the Mets have won. The Mets have won last. They've won 6 of 8. They play a lot of wild card teams coming up here, man. Okay. I really don't want them to make the wild card. I was about
to say, let's do it.
It'd be really, really funny if they did.
It would. It'd be hilarious, and I would love it.
If the Mets sweep this next series against the Braves, which is
because that's
maybe impossible, but if it does happen,
consider me for sure impossible.
Consider me a believer. I'm buying back in.
D-Good points out the Yankees have lost 8 in a row. Things are truly horrendous in baseball land up there in New York. I'm used to making fun of the New York teams in the NFL. Those 2 teams are actually in New York, so good for them at least. So the Nashville SC game, a crazy game, an incredible watch. I'm glad that all the people that spent, they had to take out extra mortgages to get tickets to get into the door, got their money's worth, and then some last night. Nashville SC falling to Inter Miami. For those of you that don't give they just don't care a lick about the MLS. This was the Leagues Cup, which many people were confused. I think that they thought this was the MLS final. No, my friend. This is a made up brand new in-season tournament championship title for Inter Miami, which of course went from the worst team in the league to now having won 7, 8, 9 matches in a row and winning the first ever Leagues Cup in-season tournament title with the addition of one Lionel Messi, who made last night's game a big fanfare, and he tried to do it to him. I was afraid that it was going to be I was afraid that it was all going to end in a whimper, and Messi was going to do to Nashville SC what he has done to pretty much every team that he has faced so far. I think he had 9 goals and 4 assists through 6 games or something. So he was the Grim Reaper knocking on each door and leaving with the blood trail. But he did score early against Nashville SC in one of the most video game-esque goals that I've ever seen in MLS play. Very, very peak Lionel Messi goal. And then the Nashville SC boys managed to equalize and sent it to PKs. And in those PKs, they went to sudden death all the way to the 11th round, where the goalies had to come out and try their luck at some penalty kicks. And Nashville's goalie, for all of the fantastic work that he had done through the Leagues Cup to get them to that point, comes up short. His goal attempt is saved by the Inter Miami goalie, and Inter Miami wins in the 11th round of PKs after a 1-1 draw in regular time. So crazy match. I do want to point out what this is so tangential and chronically online of me, but I felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this horrendous take from one Miss Jenny Chu. I believe she covers the MLS or maybe just soccer on a larger scale for CBS, I believe, but she has this tweet going around the internet, and it is being ratioed for very good reason. Nashville fans last night, every time that Lionel Messi would do pretty much anything, walk out of the tunnel, touch the ball on the pitch, attempt a shot, sail one over the crossbar when he's got a free kick look, they would boo the living fool out of him, as they should. And she tweets, Nashville fans booing when Messi has the ball. You can't boo the best player in the world, y'all. Crying, laughing emoji. It's just wrong, ... Can you all those years that Tom Brady terrorized the NFL and would come to your stadium and he's dunked on your team for 2 decades and he's doing it again. You should, how dare you be mad at him? How dare you boo him from the stands? You should be cheering on his greatness and then sending thank you gift baskets to his hotel room. I mean, all those years that LeBron terrorized the East with Cleveland and Miami, all those fans should never have been booing him. They should have been recognizing him for the greatness that he was. They should have been thanking him, crying and weeping at his feet, kissing the ring. How ridiculous is this take, JT? This is insanity.
It's pretty ridiculous, but it goes to show just how different of a world soccer is, and to that extent football as well. I guess,
but I've seen a lot of soccer diehards online roasting her like no other.
I mean, I get where she's coming from, but she's still just absolutely incorrect about this. So
yeah, she is yes. Completely incorrect. Danilo in the comments, this is hand up. Clearly I don't follow the MLS anything more than casually. Apparently I guess I get it mixed up. The NBA is about to start a brand new in-season tournament. That's probably what I'm mixing it up with. This still a made up, they did make it up in 2019. It's just it's not a, it's a trophy, but what is it really cool? Back to the regular season next week. So enjoy it, I guess.
It encapsulates all of the North American teams. So it's one step outside of MLS, sure. I guess. But yeah, technically
it's somewhere between CONCACAF and the MLS, kind of
if the NBA tournament, in-season tournament, allowed the AP top 5 of colleges at that time to come play with them as well.
Except I guess the opposite though, because it sounds like a lot of the teams that Nashville SC, Club America and
yes,
Monterey
it's reverse,
were
a lot better,
hardest teams they play all year long. So yeah,
but the premise,
weird situation, but riveting watch nonetheless. As a sports fan, can absolutely appreciate what that tournament did for the sport, and a bummer of a loss. But really, you can't hang your head too low from that one. You're really the first, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Danilo can correct me again in the comments, but I'm pretty sure Nashville SC can say they're the first team that Messi has played in the MLS where Messi, they didn't allow Messi to single-handedly beat them. Like, they got beat, but not by Messi. They lost in the end in a really, I mean, frankly, a strange situation. Your goalie having to take a penalty kick. Like, that's when you get to that point, it's kind of it's very much a coin toss at that point. They could have won that game pretty easily, and they just came up short. So a frustrating situation for them, but really exciting for the city of Nashville to have such an incredible event. Let's talk about the Titans now. We've successfully gone about 10 minutes into today's show and not even discussed the Titans and their preseason game last night. But frankly, that is reflective. And Danilo says he would agree with that. The defense did a great job. Yes. So I'm glad that I'm not completely speaking out of my depth on that front. Let's talk about the Titans, though. They played their second preseason game last night against the Vikings up in Minneapolis. They won 24-16, I believe. That was the final score, right?
Correct. Yes.
I get it mixed up because they lost their first game 23-17, right?
Yes.
So very similar scores, but this time the Titans do come out on top in a win that means absolutely nothing. But what does mean something is what we saw from certain players on the field. And before we get to a full recap of that game, JT, let me dive into the warm-up for today's show. And here is the warm-up today. I have to address these Malik Willis, Will Levis conspiracy theories that are starting to fester online that are both ridiculous and peak preseason reaching. It's desperate boredom time in the preseason, and it's showing from Titans fans that are taking this, and for those that maybe have been not paying attention at all in the last 4 or 5 days to the Titans, on Thursday's joint practice against the Vikings, rookie quarterback Will Levis leaves the last 20-ish minutes, I believe, of practice, goes down with an injury of sorts that is very much we're in the dark on this. We don't know. We know it's a lower body injury of some sort. The initial inclination from most was like, well, maybe it's that foot that he dealt with in college last year, but then he wasn't wearing a boot and he was running around in the warm-ups before the preseason game. Maybe it's his calf because he's got a wrap on his calf before the game. But then folks point out, I think Pretty Boy Lipschitz points out on Twitter that he's been wearing that a lot of camp. Doesn't necessarily rule out that it could be a calf, and maybe it's something that he's been dealing with throughout camp, hence the wrap, and he just aggravated it. But that's not new necessarily last night, so we don't know for sure that's what it is. We don't know what he's dealing with. I'd imagine it's probably a soft tissue injury of some sort that he just tweaked, that he just pulled a little bit, a small strain of sorts. Certainly nothing that the coaching staff is too worried about if they're letting him go out there and warm up and run warm-ups, like, physically run around on the field before the game, throw practice balls to the receivers in the warm-ups, like doing pretty much everything you'd see from a regular quarterback that's going to play, but then he doesn't play. Sounds like they held him out just as a precautionary. You got to be careful with injuries in the preseason. Guys will not play for much, much smaller, more insignificant reasons than in the regular season. Like you hear guys, and I'm not saying this is the case. Like we don't know what the news is on guys like Kyrus Jackson and Kyle Phillips yet, but you have to take those kind of injuries with a grain of salt, right? Because in the regular season, those knee injuries where they both go out and you're like, oh no, a knee, they get, you hear they get carted off on Twitter or wherever, and you're terrified, you're fearing the worst. But then they're both listed as questionable. Like there's a very good chance they both were just taken out of the game as a preseason precautionary maneuver to just get them to the regular season, right? Like maybe they tweaked something in their knee where you're like, they could wrap that bad boy up, put a brace on, get back out there. We just don't know. So in preseason injuries, the severity is very much, it's kind of a funhouse mirror in the preseason. You don't quite know what you're looking at, and things can be distorted based on what we expect from the regular season. But all of that being said, the conspiracy theory making, the tinfoil hat wearing that was going on with Will Levis, because his injury that was keeping him from playing, according to the coaching staff, visually appeared to not be a big deal in the lead up to the game. We didn't get a clear answer at the time of the practice. We didn't get any video evidence of him having some sort of injury out there on the field at practice. And then again, before the game, we didn't see any reason to believe he was hurting. There were a number of folks online, JT, that were insinuating or flat out saying that they thought he was being held out for a couple different reasons. I saw at least one person say that they thought he was being held out, like being benched because he's the clear quarterback 3, and they're punishing him, or they don't think he's ready. He doesn't have command of the offense. And so they're giving Malik all the reps because Will Levis is not ready. I saw some others saying that this is all a part of the Titans coaching staff and front office's ruse to pump up the stock of Malik Willis. We got to get this guy's stock in the eyes of the rest of the league as high as possible in the preseason, because as soon as the season begins, Will Levis is our guy as quarterback too, and we're going to look to sell Malik Willis. This is all an attempt to make him as valuable an asset as humanly possible so that we can ship him on out of here once the season begins. Both of these ideas are complete and utter malarkey. They're nonsense. It's ridiculousness. And let me tell you why. Those are two reasons to explain away the idea that for one of those two reasons, one reason or another, the Titans coaching staff is choosing actively, without a great reason other than their own agenda, to take away incredibly valuable reps in the second ever preseason game for their second round pick, who they traded up for to get in this past year's draft. They are actively keeping him from getting those incredibly valuable reps because conspiratorial reasons. Not because maybe they're trying to protect the player from himself and they feel like his injury is one that he needs a couple of days of rest. We need him, we would like to have him available during the regular season, and soft tissue injuries tend to linger. They tend to nag when you go on and on and on and don't address them. That's way too reasonable an explanation. Far too rational, far too normal. That is I don't know if anyone has ever watched like medical dramas. You hear commonly in medical TV shows, and then from what I hear in actual law practice or medical practices rather, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, right? Which basically means go with the most likely explanation, right? Keep it simple when you're trying to explain away something that you're not sure about. People are trying to hear the zebras. They desperately want the hoofbeats to be zebras. And I'm here to tell you, it's a horse, man. Like it's absolutely a horse. I get it. It's the preseason. You're bored, but you got to take the tinfoil hat off. Malik Willis, here are the two. Let's get into these two theories, by the way. The first one, that Malik Willis's stock is being artificially pumped up by the coaching staff. First of all, clearly that didn't work last night. We're going to get into that more, but like, if that's the case, mission failed. We'll get him next time. That is a situation where, one, I don't think playing him more is going to, in any circumstance, continue to boost his stock enough to make him a really tasty asset to other teams. And even if it did, a trade requires two to tango, JT, and people often forget this. Who out there in the league is trading anything for a clearly backup quarterback, Malik Willis, in season out of desperation? And if so, what are you getting best case? A sixth round pick? A fifth round pick? Who is in desperate need of a project, young, raw backup quarterback, so much so that they're willing to trade for one in week 4 of the NFL season? Like, that's not going to be a thing. They may very well choose to trade him down the road, but it's not happening this season. It's absolutely not happening this season. He's going to be on the roster. By the way, Mike Herndon, who we love on this show, and I know Mike personally, he's a friend of mine. He's still saying crazy things online. He said that he's not 100% sure Malik Willis is making this roster. I saw him say that today online. What are you talking about, Mike? He's for sure making the roster. You're crazy. He said there's a 90% chance that there's a chance they still cut him. No, there's not. No, there plainly is not. The future of this team's quarterback room is between Malik Willis and Will Levis, two very young, very raw, very promising in terms of their traits and physical abilities, players that this team wants to have compete behind the scenes for the next 17, 16, 15 months, however long it is until I'm dumb. 12 months. I forgot we're already almost to the season here. I'm trying to do off-season math. The next 12 calendar months, they'd like to see these two guys compete for the job next year. Then they'd probably be interested in potentially trading one if one is worth something. But that's not happening anytime soon, man. It's not. So that's ridiculous. And then this other theory that Will Levis is not, he's just there, he's being punished, or he doesn't have it to. First of all, why would they go from 1 week ago, yeah, he's got, he's so in control of this offense and we have so much trust in him that we want to see him play half the game, to then a week later with no evidence from practice. This guy, he's having a tough time out there. No, it's just kind of same old Will Levis, like pretty average, not a huge impressive guy out there, but not making a million mistakes either. Like he's still a rookie going through the motions. Suddenly they're like, this guy doesn't have it. He's out. We're done. Pull the plug. He's not playing in the preseason. It's craziness. So I've rambled on this for probably 7 minutes too long, but I find it so ridiculous that I wanted to cover every angle and shut all of this down. It's stupid. It's dumb. They sat him because he's hurt. Anything beyond that is narrative building on your end, and you are bored, and it is the preseason, and just like stop. Go home to your wife. Like it just relax, okay? So that is a warm up for today, and let's get into some actual substantive, important discussion from the preseason week 2. JT, before we dive into it, anything that I've missed during my rambling in the comments that we need to address?
Not that we won't get into here. I think we can start off just like talking by points. Kenneth did point out that to kind of retort against those heinous claims that it's hilarious that I think Will Levis gained ground on QB2 simply by not playing. Yes, true, and then Kenneth. Also to put a bow on our early show shenanigans, Pretty Boy Lipshit said Tier Tar was more dominant last night than Messi. So we can get into that now.
Yes, this is something we can dive into. Let's start with some general coaching points from last night. And this is the first clip from today's Mike Vrabel press conference that I wanted to play. He was asked what he thought overall after having a chance to watch the coaching tape last night and this morning about the game, what his general takeaways were. And here's what he had to say in our first clip, JT.
What you like and we didn't like. I thought we covered kicks well in the second half. I thought we had 3 tackles inside the 20. I thought some young guys showed up in that regard. Didn't like. I thought the ball security was probably better from our running backs. There was some big emphasis throughout the week. I like the fact that we got 7 pass breakups, 7 PBUs. I like the fact that we finished with the football in our hands in a 4-minute drive. I think we have to execute as a whole. Our ability to throw the football and the ability to catch it and the ability to be in the right spots and protect and all those things. So we'll keep working on that.
And with that, JT, let's go player by player, and we'll talk a little bit about what he had to say.
Yeah, first of all, the player last night that kind of broke out onto the scene that we've been saying he's coming, and you guys just want to write him off and continue to write him off, Tyjae Spears.
Tyjae Spears, he rocks still, and I say breaks onto the scene because we talked about this last week. He's been good in both preseason games, but yesterday he showed, I think, more of that explosiveness, more of that juice, more of that burst. He came away, his stat line looked like 7 carries for 57 yards, 8.1 yards per carry on average with that 33-yard long when he broke away, leaping over, I think, Lewis Seen in the Vikings secondary to get pay dirt, gets the touchdown. Did he score last week? Was that his first technical?
That was his first touchdown, yes.
Okay, yeah. So are we sure? Did he score on that first drive?
No, that was Malik who ran it in on the
That
first
was Malik.
drive.
You're right. Okay, yeah. So first touchdown, good for him. But yeah, the dude absolutely rocks. He is, I'm willing to say already that he is the best sidekick that Derrick Henry has ever had by a country mile. He's just got so much juice. He's kind of like what the Titans were hoping Darrington Evans could be for Derrick Henry a couple of years ago when he was drafted out of Appalachian State. Well, obviously, he's been a journeyman throughout the NFL at this point because he's one of the most injury-stricken players that I can think of. Frankly, he's just really cannot stay healthy for any stretch of time. But I think that even Darrington at his best, at his healthiest, wasn't quite what Tyjae is capable of. I think the juice is ridiculous. He hit a top speed of 20.1 miles per hour on that 33-yard touchdown run, which is flying. He looked super, super good. Really have nothing else to say about him, but the other running back last night that the Titans played also looked pretty good, JT. It was a night of running for the Titans.
It was, and Tyjae Spears was outdone by this running back who hit a 21.6 miles per hour on his long run, being Julius Chestnut.
Yeah, Julius is a guy that I think we can firmly say now is the Titans running back 3. Whether he's 3 or 4, however many, I think the Titans at this point, if I had to do the 53-man today, and I'm going to have an article come out with my updated 53-man roster this week, so look out for that on BroadwaySportsMedia.com. I would say they keep 3 running backs. I think we said that last week when we did our first projection. But whether they keep 3 or they keep 4, he is going to make this roster. There's no way he doesn't. I believe Mike Herndon, speaking of Mike, who we dumped on him once. Let me pump him up. He found a stat earlier today. I think this is off the top of my head, so I may have it slightly wrong, but I think that 21.6 miles per hour would have been the 5th fastest time of any running back last season. And that's from a 5'11", 226-ish pound running back in Julius Chestnut. I just see no way that they do not keep this man on their roster. And I really see no way that he's passed up by any of the other guys on the depth chart. We talked earlier on in the preseason about how he and Jonathan Ward were kind of battling. Unfortunately, Ward has kind of fallen off the face of the planet since that first preseason game because of his injury. And that's a real bummer and not his fault at all, but that's just the way that things work. And Chestnut is making the most of his opportunity. He also showed up on special teams, which I think is one of those things that we have continued to preach, JT. It matters so much this time of year. That is what coaches are looking for when they're trying to decide those back end of the roster guys. An easy tiebreaker, probably the number one tiebreaker when you're trying to choose between this guy we keep, or maybe this guy. Okay, who's going to be a bigger impact in special team duties? And absolutely the case with Julius Chestnut this year is that he has stepped up his game. I talked to him probably 3 weeks ago at this point now. Like, what's the number one thing that you have upped in terms of your game this offseason? What have you been focusing on? And his initial response was, I've just been working really hard to up my ability as a special teamer. I want to be able to prove to this team that I'm valuable both on offense and on special teams. And here's our second clip from Mike Vrabel's press conference today talking about just how much Chestnut showed up on special teams last night in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think Julius showed up on special teams. I think, just seeing those things sometimes, if he's the backside on the first kickoff, making sure that he trims the fat and squeezes. But I don't think Julius is doing anything to hurt himself, and certainly made him a captain yesterday for a reason. Embodies what we believe in, and had the drop in practice, had the drop early in the game, but made a heck of a catch down there in the end zone. So those are all things that we try to look at and appreciate.
A couple of comments here from Pretty Boy saying that Tajay, I think he was talking about Tajay as the best running back rookie so far this preseason. Yeah, I would agree, but I'd say that these two may be the best running back tandem we've seen in the preseason, which again, that's such a weird that's a weird title. That is a Leagues Cup in terms of congrats on your trophy. I'm not sure it means anything, but fair. They've looked very, very good. And Ted Tennyson in the comments, if we keep Haskins, it will be special teams only. Yes, totally. I would say that we've been predicting the demise of Haskins ever since the legal situation came down the pike, and that has certainly complicated his chances. But frankly, at this point, JT, I'm not sure, legal situation or not, he'd be making the team. His stock has fallen precipitously for the past 3-4 weeks now, like a full month worth of Hassan Haskins falling in the perceived pecking order. And at this point, his pass blocking acumen and special team skills that were buoying him as a candidate to make this team, guys are kind of showing that they don't he's not the only guy that can do those things, right? You're seeing that special teams acumen from Chestnut. You're seeing that pass blocking acumen from Tajay and from Julius. I don't think that they have any excuse, legal or non-legal, to justify keeping him on this roster at this point. So I think that his grave is officially dug. He's not been healthy. We didn't see him play. We've not seen him since that first preseason game. He and Jonathan Ward both. We've not seen at practice. We've not seen in the second preseason game. So it's a weird situation. Not sure exactly. They don't tell us what the injury situation is. But whether he gets healthy or not, I just don't see him making this team.
Yeah, we can move on now to Malik Willis, who, outside of a few plays last night that we'll get into later, was the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans last night. Let's talk about him because he had a up and down game last night.
He did. I don't want to go on and on micro analyzing everything that Malik Willis did. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory that anybody who watched he didn't seize his opportunity to the fullest last night. You could argue that he had a chance to really not put a nail in the Will Levis quarterback 2 coffin necessarily, because as we talked about with our buddy Nick Suss a couple weeks ago, I still kind of maintain I think we're going to go into the season and they're going to be quarterback 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B. Like, I don't think it's going to matter to the coaching staff who the backup is if and until we get one of them, God forbid, having to come into the game in relief of Ryan Tannehill if he were to go down. So I won't be shocked if we don't like it. Our perception is all we have to go based off of for who is the quarterback 2 and who is the quarterback 3. But he was fine last night. Like, he was below average, certainly not as good as he looked in his first game. He looked more like 2022 Malik Willis than what we'd seen from him so far this year, and the improvement. There still was improvement. It was not horrible. I think that people were kind of overdoing it. A lot of what I saw last night in not watching it, just following it on Twitter and then watching it, like, I feel like there's a disconnect there. I was kind of expecting it to look a lot worse than it did. He was fine. He was inaccurate too often. He was bailing from clean pockets too often, although as a runner, he looked fantastic. I think he had something like 8 carries for 90 yards. 11 carries for 91 yards, 8.3 yards per carry. So like the athleticism was on full display last night. And that element of his game is totally praiseworthy. Looked very good. But then as a passer, 10 for 17, 85 yards, 5 yards per attempt average with a touchdown and interception. Took 2 sacks, a passer rating of 67. Very average, and certainly not a guy that you're like, oh, maybe a starter in the future. Like, that game didn't really reflect that. And so I think that, as Kenneth said earlier, the quarterback 2 race, at least in our minds, is still very much up in the air. Will Levis is not out of it by any means because Malik Willis didn't go and take that mantle. Let's hear from Mike Vrabel on what his thoughts were about his young quarterback's performance in preseason week 2.
I mean, I saw him, play fast when he felt like the pocket wasn't there. We still need to stop switching the football, which we've told him, and we'll, continue to rep. And I think maybe for quarterbacks that don't scramble as much in practice or aren't going to get hit in practice, I'm just trying to think about how we rep that. A guy taking off and having the ball in his right hand and then running and trying to keep him from switching it. And Malik knows that. Like, this is not a secret, but played fast. When he took off, was decisive. Continue improving with the timing of things and making sure that he's going through his progression so that his timing is there. I'm sure he'd like to have the one back from Nick Westbrook. Probably just pulled the string on a little bit, but also had some balls that, again, Chig knows he needs to come down with. And then just the coordination of the interception of making a great decision. If we need that ball thrown in the alley, then if the receiver's, for whatever reason, not in the alley, not forcing it in there and knowing it's cover 2 and just finding a place to get rid of the football so that we're not putting it in harm's way.
Let's talk about some numbers from Malik's performance last night. We saw his average time to throw increase in week 2, which is something that we're continuing to harp on with him since he joined the Tennessee Titans, and we've seen him in the NFL. In week 1, it was not good, and we were kind of hoping, I was hoping that we would see him continue to try to step it down, and last night he went in the wrong direction. Through 2 games in this preseason so far, he is at a 3.58 second average time to throw, which is the slowest out of the preseason quarterbacks with a 30 drop back minimum. These numbers compiled, by the way, our buddy Zach Lyons, appreciate him putting this on X on Twitter. But in terms of pressure responsibility, Jalen Duncan continues to be an absolute adventure of a roller coaster of a pass protector. He allowed 3 quarterback hurries. He's got some reps on tape where you're like, yeah, there it is. And then some you're like, oh God, there it is. Yikes. It's very up and down with him. You got Chris Hubbard responsible for 1, Peter Skoronski, Andrew Rupchich, Daniel Brunskill, all responsible for 1. And the only sack of the night was on Levin. I think ESPN actually had him down for 2 sacks. So I don't know. Maybe there's some incongruent numbers there, but if you took away the sacks and the scrambles from Levis last night in terms of time to throw and just counted the ones where he attempted a pass in week 1, last week against Chicago, he was the 7th slowest quarterback in that week with a 2.92 second average to throw. In week 2, last night, he was the 3rd slowest with a 3-second flat time to throw. And in weeks 1 and 2 combined, a 2.95 second to throw average, which is the dead last slowest of any quarterback so far in the preseason with minimum 30 dropbacks. For comparison, Will Levis, again, a guy who is certainly not out of this race, and you could point to this one stat alone to be like, here's maybe why. Not through 2 weeks, he didn't play last night, but in week 1, he had a minimum of 15 dropbacks, so he qualifies as the 14th fastest quarterback that week with a 2.56 second average time to throw. So like 0.4 of a second faster than Willis has averaged so far. He just continues to sit back there for far too long. His decision-making is too slow. His ability to go from read to read is too slow. And he sits and pats the ball and takes too long. Simply won't work in the NFL. No matter how much better he gets fundamentally as a quarterback, it's not going to matter unless he gets faster, unless he gets much, much faster. And so that's a situation where we're going to continue to monitor it, and it's fine, in my opinion, because, again, he's not being asked to be a starter anytime soon, so he's just going to need to continue to progress, and I'm sure that's 1A on the list of things for his coaches to work on with him is got to keep getting faster with these dropbacks. But he had an all right night. I wouldn't say it was horrible. I would certainly not say it's good. I'd say it was a below average showing for a guy that could have done a lot better.
Yeah, and then as you touched on the offensive line, let's talk about them, the first team, and who do you think is coming out on top right now in the race to start at right tackle?
Yeah, let's talk about the offensive line real quick. I want to talk about Logan's question here. He asks, do you think playing with the threes, or the third team, forces longer time to throw for Malik Willis due to the wide receiver's inability to separate? There's some element to that, but again, when you're playing with the threes wide receivers, they're often facing the threes defensive backs. And so, like, it should sort of balance itself out in that way. It certainly doesn't always work that way, but you're not seeing a dramatic, like, when you chart the time to throw, it's not like he's going NFL fast to begin the game with the ones and the twos, and then it falls off as the game goes. Like, it's consistently too slow. So it's tough for him. Like, there's no justification. I don't think there's no way to really make it look better than it is. He's just taking too long. Now, the offensive line, not a ton to talk about here. Just two things. The first team did get in there for a couple of series, I think 2 or 3. They went 3 and out to start the game, and that was not enough for Mike Vrabel. He wanted to see some more, and so he puts them in there for a little bit longer. It took some time to settle in, but that was another one of those things where people were talking last night, like, oh, no, the Titans are going to suck this year because the offensive line is a disaster. Look at how bad they are. And then I watched, and it's like, yeah, and Mike Vrabel, he reciprocated this sentiment today in his press conference. Like, yes, they weren't great to start, but that's just, some days it's going to be like that. And they were slow to begin, but then they got up to speed, and I felt like they were fine by the time they finished their time out there last night. So I don't think that was a bad performance at all. I thought they were perfectly serviceable by the end of their 2 or 3 series. Justin Murray, new offensive lineman for the Titans. They brought in that flurry of signings back a couple weeks ago when Jamarco Jones was let go, and they brought in Chris Hubbard. They brought in Zach Johnson. They brought in Justin Murray. He's a guy that we saw at right tackle last night for a good bit of the game. And people are kind of excited about him. I know, like Zach Lyons and Mike Herndon and some others that I saw. Justin Graver, I think, shares the sentiment. He should be getting, at the very least, a chance to compete for that starting right tackle job. He played exclusively at guard his first week here in that first preseason game, which was kind of weird. But then last night he was at tackle, and he has not allowed at either position in the preseason game so far. He's not allowed a single pressure yet. I mean, maybe the only player with like substantial snaps out there to have done that. Like he has been really solid in pass protection. Now, what I'm gathering from the coaching staff, and he was asked, Mike Vrabel was asked about Justin Murray today at his press conference. You can kind of tell that they're they're not as impressed by him because he leaves a good bit to be desired in the run game, which still is number one for this Titans coaching staff. That's what they care most about, I think. But as a pass protector, he's really impressed folks. And I think for good reason, people are asking, why is he not getting more competition at the very least with Chris Hubbard for that first team right tackle job? I'm on that train. I think that he absolutely should be given that chance to compete, and the Titans should be doing everything in their power to find the best possible situation, leave no stone unturned for their right tackle spot for the first 6 weeks. They really have no choice, and I think it's foolish and arrogant and lazy not to give him a fair shake.
Yeah, let's move to the tight end position, which some good and some bad last night. And one kind of, are you concerned about Chig? I'll just throw it out there right now. Like, I was going to try to beat around the bush.
Not even a little bit. Nope, I'm not. That's like, we needed to bring it up because he did have 2 drops last night to start the game. Not even a little bit am I concerned about. Like, I pretend I do not see it. I pretend I do not see it. It's the preseason. It's not real. It's all in your imagination. It's an illusion. It's fake. It was never there to begin with. We made it up. It's a fabrication. Okay. Like, we know what I'm going to choose to go with the sample size of his entire career up until last night, both on the practice field, in preseason games, and in actual football games last year, which I would lean on most heavily. Over one night in Minnesota in the preseason with Malik Willis throwing to him where he's got butterfingers, just like, was it good? No, absolutely not. He has to bring those balls in, and Mike Vrabel said as much today, but it's one of those things where it's not reflective of who he is. I'm not questioning whether I truly comprehend what Malik or what Chig is because of 2 drops. No, like, again, it's relax, everybody, deep breaths. Chig is still a very good football player. Unless you want to tell all your friends he sucks because of those 2 drops because you want to draft him in a fantasy, knock yourself out. Otherwise, he's fine.
Yeah, and then we can move on to the tight end last night who really shined, Thomas Odukoya, who Ted Pennington says Odukoya was a beast last night, and Pretty Boy Lipshit says Thomas Odukoya is going to end up starting alongside Chig.
Pretty Boy, I love you. I love you. Truly, I appreciate everything that you do to support our content, but you are constantly taking everything a step too far. You've got to relax, bro. Like, just chill. Thomas is going to make the roster for sure. Is he going to start? Maybe by the end of the year, but not yet. So let's just hang on. Okay. He has not had any track record in the NFL so far. Okay. You know who has? Trayvon Wesco. Like, the reason he was brought in and paid a significant sum of money for a player of his caliber is because he has been in the NFL already, this glorified lineman of a tight end that you're wanting to have in your system for 12 and 22 personnel. So he's going to be the starter. Like, that's for sure. But is he going to get some significant playing time, Thomas Odukoya? At this rate, would not rule it out because he has been a freaking monster as a blocker. Like, he has, again, like, let me go back to positive here because Lipschitz forces me. You go too far. You force me to be negative and rein you back in. So ignore what he said, everybody. Here's what I'm here to say. He's very, very good. He's a player that has made significant strides as an international player. And to be fair, like, yes, Pretty Boy Lipschitz says in the comments, Vrabel loves him. Yes, he does. He was one of Mike Vrabel's off-season award winners. And for a good reason, I think, because he has clearly demonstrated. I mean, this is a guy who was an international player last year. He was the international designation player for the Titans. He was kept on the roster in that special designation all year long. And when he first came in at practice, training camp, JT, it was incredibly raw. It was like, woof, that's tough. That's rough. He looks very much more polished today. As a receiver, he is fine, very like Jeff Swaim level, but actually probably can catch much better because Jeff Swaim had clubs for hands, I guess. I don't know. He's fine as a receiver. Like, he will catch a ball and probably not have a lot of yak opportunities, but move the chains at the very least. But as a blocker, as a run blocker in particular, but as a pass blocker as well, which he demonstrated both of those last night. As a run blocker, a number of the Titans' big runs last night, he was the one laying the one-on-one key solo block down that was giving the running back an opportunity to get a significant gain in yardage. Like, he's done this for 2 weeks in a row now. He's continued to do it in practice. He's continued to get more opportunities with higher level teams up the roster. Like, he's going to make this roster. He for sure is making this roster. And I think, well, I'll get to this in a minute. First, let's hear from Mike Vrabel. I asked him today what he's seen from Thomas Odukoya through his first 2 preseason games. And here's what Mike Vrabel had to say on Thomas.
At the point of attack, I think he, similar to Wesco. I think he's a big-bodied guy that can go out there and try to neutralize some of those edge defenders, and had some really nice blocks on the outside. Had one that probably needs to be better down there on the goal line, blocking down, and the guy crosses his face. But Thomas is going to keep working, and he'll show back up tomorrow and be ready to go.
And because Thomas is making this roster, I believe that the roster at the tight end position is kind of set at this point. Maybe the only thing in question is the number of guys. I think that it's going to be 4. Could it be 5? Maybe. We'll see. And I think that the player I'm about to mention did a good job last night. In my opinion, he was outshined by what we saw from Odukoya. But I think the guy that I was really high on early on in preseason, and I still am as a potential future guy, but right now I just think it's not working in his favor. Alize Mack, who as a pass catcher, he's kind of that hybrid. Or like you've got Chig, you've got Josh Wiley as your pass catching tight ends, right? They're not offering a ton in the blocking department, but as pass catchers, they offer a lot. In the blocking department, you've got Trevon Wesco and you've got Thomas Odukoya. And then that kind of hybrid guy is Alize Mack, where he is a bigger body and is capable of blocking better than the pass catching guys. But he's also a significantly better pass catcher than the blocking guys. He's there squarely in the middle. He's your flex. He's your hybrid guy. That being said, right now I think he's on the outside looking in, which is a bummer. But his injury setbacks the past couple of days, past couple of weeks have kind of taken him out of the picture. Last night we saw him more than we'd seen him in a couple of days. So that was good. And if he continues to trend up, maybe they end up keeping 5. They can't justify letting any of them go. But I do kind of think that Odukoya and Wesco, people are like, there's redundancy there. Like, get a guy like Mac. I've seen people talk about this. Get a guy like Mac who offers like a, you've got your fastball, you've got your change up, or you've got your splitter. Get a change up in Alize Mack. Yeah, I get that logic, but I think this team wants redundancy in their tight end room. They're going to run a lot of 12, a lot of 22 personnel. They're going to have 2 tight ends on the field in their sets very, very often. And I think they're going to want to go heavy with their 2 best blocking tight ends in Odukoya and Wesco a good bit. So, like, I think they want both of those guys on the roster. And then with the receiving guys, like Chig obviously is going nowhere. He's your best tight end. And then Wiley, you spent your fifth round pick, right? Hello, JT?
He was a 5th round pick.
5th round pick. Thank you.
Yes.
So he's
sorry, I thought you were trying to
no, you're good. I was
it out on yourself.
I should have made it more clear. Yeah, he's your 5th round pick. He's shown some promise. He's had some ups and downs, but he certainly is a promising future prospect for this team. They're not letting him go anywhere. I think that Mac is on the cutting room floor, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then we can move to the defensive side of the ball now, which there was a lot of guys last night who really impressed.
Yeah, so 3 guys that were mentioned by Vrabel in the clip we're about to show: Eric Garrett, Trey Avery, and Anthony Kendall. I think all 3 were mentioned last week as well. So they're the young guys battling at the back end of this defensive back competition that are really showing out and making this a fun competition. I think that those 3 guys are certainly doing a lot of things well for themselves, but they played really well last night on the back end. Let's hear from Mike Vrabel on what he had to say about those 3 guys last night.
I think they have. I think that whether it's on defense or special teams, Anthony Kendall showed up as a special teams contributor. Trey Avery continues to improve. We have different guys working through there at safety, and between Garrar and Marsh playing inside and outside. So it was fun to watch. We played hard, and I know guys were tired, but that's what's supposed to happen. And you don't feel as tired when you win. You don't feel as sore when you win.
Yeah, so all 3 of those guys looked pretty good. And then on the defensive front side of things here, as who said this a minute ago? D-Good said a moment ago that Caleb Murphy playing his way onto the 53-man roster. Absolutely, that's the case. And we've been talking in the first couple weeks before the preseason games, JT, like Caleb Murphy, we were pretty amped about him to begin. the off season.
Where did he go?
Where is he? The first 2.5, 3 weeks of training camp, we've not seen him. This guy that set the FBS, I think set the NCAA record or something for
the Division
24.
2. Yeah.
Division 2. Yeah. The Division 2, and NCAA, the Division 2 record for most sacks in a season with 24 last year, I believe. He's a sack artist. Where are the sacks? We weren't seeing it in practice. And then he chose to let's just do it in the actual preseason games, which, okay, sure. That works. I guess that's the most important times to do it. So he's certainly done that. 3 sacks now through 2 preseason games, playing his way onto this roster. I think he is clearly on the inside looking out now, just not looking out, just on the inside looking in. He certainly is over the bubble line, in my opinion, for this roster. If he continues to play better and better each week and show out in the preseason games, it showed that he's more than just a Division 2 sack artist and can't play with the big boys. So far against lesser competition, to be fair out there, I want to see them give him some more work against NFL starting caliber players, but against the guys he's out there playing against in these preseason games, he's looking like a man amongst boys, which is what you want to see from a guy that you want to make your roster. So he's been doing everything in his power to make this roster, and I think it's paying off for him.
Yeah, and then we'll move to some odds and ends here. First off, kicking battle.
Can we can we please kick the ball, please? This is so frustrating. We have a clip from Mike Vrabel here. Friend of the show, Paul Karski, asked about, you don't get, no field goals last night, right? I don't think a single one. You saw one. Trey Wolf from, I think, 22 yards. So, again, nothing. It doesn't count. Not real. You just haven't seen it. We've seen 3 field goals through 2 preseason games, and that's not enough for 2 guys that won't miss. These guys, we need a lot of sample size to make this determination if we're going to do that from the preseason game. And so, terrible take, awful take. Pretty Blue Lipschitz. Our kicker is currently on another team. No, he's not. It's one of these 2. You're crazy. People that are upset about the kicker competition are just upset because, and I get it, sort of, you're not seeing it in the preseason games. Sure, fine, but you got to trust me, man. I'm there at practice every day. These cats can kick. These cats are swinging. They're gonna be fine. Whoever you have out there, it's gonna work. Whichever one wins out is going to be a perfectly suitable NFL starting kicker. I promise. They are very good at their jobs. You have a good thing going in this kicking competition. So if you're queasy, if you're nauseous, if you're concerned about the kicking competition, you just got to take my word for it. I know that's hard. I know it's scary, and these guys are not known commodities. You don't know their names. They're not known quantities. Just trust me. They're good. It's frustrating for everyone involved, me in particular, because I've been telling y'all they're good for a long time now, and the team won't let me show you on the preseason field. Gotta see it. Haven't seen it yet. And we're at the point now, we're at the buzzer. They're going to have to make this determination based off of, I don't know, a coin flip. We thought the preseason games would be a tiebreaker for this competition. And it's proving to not be the case so far. And so I'm not quite sure. I hope we get a chance, JT, to talk to the position coach or to the special teams coordinator, Craig Ackerman, this week, because I want to ask him, say the preseason games just show you nothing. So far they have. What do you do? How do you make that determination? What goes into it? And I don't know if I'll get a decent answer or not, but that's something that I'm really curious about. And we'll find out one way or another here in a couple of days, August 29th. Somebody's not making this roster. And so far, I have no idea which one it is. Elsewhere on the odds and ends here, we got the clip real quick. Let me play the clip from Mike Vrabel. Hear his thoughts on not being able to manufacture opportunities for the kicking game in the preseason so far.
You can't create the situation.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, whether you want to try to, for example, 4th and 2 at the 50, it's probably a coin flip. Wanted to try to give Stoney a plus 50, and that ball needs to be better than the 17-yard line, and Stoney knows that, right? So that's, in my mind, in that game, looking at whether we go for it or whether we punt it, but wanted to try to get Stoney a plus 50 because that was a point of emphasis. And I know that your question was about the field goal kickers, but just using that as an example, felt like I could kind of create that one. I think just the consistency. I think that those guys, Caleb and Trey, of the consistency each and every day. And sometimes not going to be able to get all those kicks, but we're going to be able to evaluate them in practice, and we'll keep seeing where we're at and seeing if we can create those same situations this week, and trying to make a decision.
Now, moving on, I had Kyle Phillips and Kearis Jackson down here in the odds and ends. We addressed that earlier on. We don't know the severity of their situation. Folks were asking for updates. Today, Mike Vrabel said he alluded to going to talk with the trainers, work with the trainers after the press conference ended this afternoon to kind of figure out. He said both guys are very much early on in their treatment regimen, and we don't really know exactly what he inferred that he's not concerned yet that either of these guys is for sure missing a significant amount of time. There you go, Easton, spit it out. It doesn't sound like either guy is a real concern so far to be a massive injury, which makes you think it may be kind of a preseason injury, funhouse mirror situation, which would be a good thing for the Titans because they, Treylon Burks, Kearis Jackson, Kyle Phillips, at least two of those guys are guys that are making the roster. Having them down going into preseason week 3 and then eventually needing receivers to play in week 1, like you need bodies. You got to get guys you want to play as much in the preseason, but get them to the season. And that's kind of proving to be a tricky needle to thread for the Titans at the wide receiver position so far. Speaking of wide receivers, I wanted to touch on Mason Kinsey. I'm not here to make fun of Mason Kinsey. I'm not here to put him down. I'm not here to be a hater. Truly, I'm not. But I wanted to address something that I'm seeing kind of gain some traction yet again online from folks talking about, like Mason Kinsey. Is he going to make the roster? He's continuing to impress and provide, opportunities for these quarterbacks in the preseason, be a reliable target, be a, kind of that trusted veteran presence out there in these preseason games. And he's producing at a high level. And so far in 2 preseason games this year, he is 4 for 37 and 4 for 40. That is four receptions for 37 yards and 4 receptions for 40 yards in his first 2 games, which leads the team 8 receptions for 77 yards so far. And people are talking about, does he maybe make the roster? Because he continues to show out each and every week. But I want you to hold your horses a little bit. I still am very confident that Mason Kinsey only has a shot to make this roster if Kyle Phillips is down and out for a significant amount of time. Like if God forbid, we find out he has a significant knee injury and he's going to miss at least the first 8 weeks of the season or whatever it may be, then, you put him on IR and maybe Mason Kinsey has a shot at this roster as Kyle Phillips insurance because he's in that mold of player. And even then, I still think it's a big question mark. And let me tell you why. Where have we seen this before for Mason Kinsey? The 2021 preseason, the first time really that he got traction as like, oh, look at this guy, preseason darling. Maybe he makes the roster. In that 2021 preseason, he had in 3 games, 4 receptions for 51 yards, 6 receptions for 56 yards, and 4 receptions for 24 yards. He led the team through the entire preseason with 14 receptions for 131 yards. Looked very, very capable and kind of electric in a number of those games, week in and week out for just shy of a month. And then the 53-man roster came out, and the Titans kept 7 receivers. And those receivers were Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Josh Reynolds, Marcus Johnson, Chester Rogers, Cam Batson, and Nick Westbrook-Akine. He didn't make the roster then, and they kept 7 guys after that preseason performance. So I just wanted to point out that with Mason Kinsey, preseason performance does not dictate 53-man roster results. It's whether it's fair or not. And he's clearly a guy that this team really loves. They love him as a camp body. They love him as a practice squad guy. He's a grinder. He's a good guy. Like he's one of my favorite players to talk to on this team when we're out there because he's just a down-to-earth guy that likes to talk ball. And he's nice and he's approachable. Like I have nothing against the person at all. I just think that there's a hard limit on him. We have seen this hard limit on him for like 3 years now. Like there's a ceiling. And with that, I think that he is still very much an uphill battle to even contend to make this roster. I wanted to pump the brakes on him a little bit. But on the other side of the coin, we did see him play some quarterback last night, which was strange. That was weird. That was odd. Hey, Mike Vrabel, what's the rationale behind that move? JT, we have a clip from Mike Vrabel. This is clip 1 The most Mike Vrabel has ever smiled in a response to any of my questions. Clearly a very tongue-in-cheek move that was rewarding a grinder in the preseason where things, again, don't really matter. But here was his response as to why Mason Kinsey got some quarterback work last night in Minnesota.
Mason's out there every day. Mason's probably, during the time that he spent on our practice squad, probably runs more than any player that we have on our roster.
Definitely.
Running receiver, playing DB throughout practice that you guys may or may not see. And I wanted to give him the opportunity. We had practiced it. When I say practice, like we walked through on Friday. I guess that was the extent of practice. And I was like, you want to do it? And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, let's do this series. And then made a play, and then we put Malik in and converted.
Where's he?
Yeah, so good for Mason Kinsey getting an opportunity last night. Like, he's earned it. He truly has. And Mike is 1,000% right that he runs more than any other guy. But in terms of making the roster, I still don't exactly see that happening. With that is our recap of the game. One more to go. Thank God. We've only got one more preseason game. And then we usually do winners and losers on a Monday. And I almost did that for today's show, but I was like, you know what? We're going to week one, we'll get back to winners and losers, not doing all that. We will focus on really diving into a handful of topics when the games actually matter. But what does matter before we end the show is some news we got to get to. So without further ado, let's get to the news with producer JT.
Yeah, one of the biggest storylines that came out today is that the Titans-Patriots joint practices were canceled for this upcoming week. Of course, that is following last night's Patriots versus Green Bay Packers game, in which Isaiah Bolden had to be carted off the field, and he was taken to the hospital near the stadium at Lambeau Field, and then the game was there suspended. And then they had an update today about that, saying after undergoing a series of evaluations and being held for overnight observation, Patriots quarterback Isaiah Bolden has been released from the Aurora Bay Medical Center in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where he was transported after sustaining an on-field injury in the fourth quarter of the preseason game. So he will travel back with the team today on this day that we are recording this. And then due to the circumstances surrounding the abrupt and unexpected ending to last night's game, the Patriots will return to Foxborough, and the joint practices that were scheduled on Tuesday and Wednesday will be canceled. So they will practice with just there in Foxborough and fly to Nashville on Thursday for Friday night's game. So just a little note on that. Obviously, good to see that Isaiah Bolden is doing okay. Obviously, joint practices, like, it not a huge issue that
not a big
for
deal.
this week.
A big loss, no. But we do have a clip from Mike Vrabel, our last clip today. Here was his explanation and response to the Titans not getting some joint practice work this week with the Patriots.
With us last night, and we wish the player well. We wish Bolden well. Obviously, that there's a recovery. We understand what can happen in this game, unfortunately. And so the Patriots are going to focus on them and making sure that they're doing what they need to do to get ready for their season. Would have loved to work with them, but obviously understand that things come up, and we're always able to adjust and adapt, and we'll practice and we'll get work in, and we'll see where we are here at the end of the week on Friday.
So, yeah, we will not have any joint practice work this week, but we'll still see DeAndre Hopkins on the field, on the other sideline of the team that he did not sign with. So that will be a very interesting
delayed gratification there.
Yes, exactly, right. But then in other news, today the Titans waived defensive back AJ Moore, who they just agreed to terms with on July 26th. He signed with the Titans last March, so this was the second stint that Moore did with the Titans, but he was injured and placed on IR in September. So I guess just didn't work out. Obviously, we talked about how obviously there was better competition that has been standing out in these games. So a move that
guys like Mike Brown, younger, more certainly healthier players in terms of their track record are going to beat him out anyways. And so I think that it makes it clear who's exactly making the roster, and it's a win for Mike Brown. So good for him.
And then Jadeveon Clowney, who was possibly making a return to the AFC South, will not, and he will be taking
doing the AFC South gauntlet anymore.
He is not. He will be taking his talents to Baltimore and joining the Ravens.
Bad
over
signing,
there,
in my opinion. Bad signing.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's not to say that he doesn't have any ability anymore. He does, but he's one of those guys that, first of all, they've got young guys at that position up there in Baltimore that I think he's going to be a pretty bad mentor to, not because he's a bad guy or anything, but in terms of his play style, he's very much a see ball, hit ball, run downhill pass rusher that is kind of a one-trick pony a little bit, certainly not capable of being the 1A alpha on a team anymore. And his tendencies are just kind of, it's bad teach tape for these guys. And I think that he's going to be taking away valuable reps now from those guys that have a much higher ceiling than he does, but need that playing experience to reach that ceiling. And so I just overall don't understand the move. Maybe that's a hot take, but I think that he maybe makes their defense a bit worse, if anything. It sacrifice, you know what it does? It raises their floor a bit at the expense of a significantly higher ceiling, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, we will see how that works out when the Titans play the Ravens over in London in week 6. So
we'll be there. Can't wait.
We'll be there. So excited to see their Jadeveon Clowney revenge game, I guess you could say, or one of them, because I'm sure there's been a few since.
He's been to so many teams. He might have 4 revenge games on the schedule this year. Who knows?
Getting to the preseason roundup from the rest of the AFC South today. The Colts defeated the Bears 24-17 last night.
Colts are better than the Titans. They beat the Bears in the preseason. The Titans lost. That's just math.
But interesting point here, as Pretty Boy Lipschitz brings up. Why do you believe the Colts sat Richardson, as Anthony Richardson did not play last night? Well, my answer to it is that he was named the starter. He's getting the starter treatment. That's essentially just kind of.
And you could say, like, well, so is Bryce Young, so is CJ Stroud. First of all, they barely played. They played some, but like it just depends on the coach. And clearly, I think Steichen is in that mold. Like, has Brock Purdy played at all this year? I don't think so. And yet, you could definitely argue he could use some like certain players that San Francisco, the Rams, like certain coaches just choose to bubble wrap their guys, and they think the preseason doesn't matter. That it's way more risk than it is worth, and so I think that's clearly not a complicated answer for you, Pretty Boy. I just think that they are he's the starter. Yes, he needs reps, but he's getting those reps in joint practices and during training camp. Like I think that they think it's not worth throwing him out there and risking having Gardner Minshew come in.
Yeah, moving on here, the Texans lose to the Dolphins 28-3. Just got an absolute whooping last night. Will Anderson Jr. looked really good.
Good football player.
CJ Stroud,
I thought he looked better.
I thought he looked better.
He had 3 or 4 throws. You're like, there it is. That's what I scouted.
Still not super impressed with him last night.
It's still shaky, but it's trending in the right direction, I think.
For sure. But that's really all I have to say. They got pounded pretty hard last night. And then the Jaguars beat the Lions 25-7 last night. Nothing really to report on that game besides it is, in fact, Tank Bigsby season, which, by the way, before we talk about him and how we were both excited to kind of see him this season, did you know his first name really isn't Tank? It's Cartavius Bigsby is his name.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, if you told, like, I'm not surprised because anybody named Tank, I'm kind of assuming that's a nickname you're rolling with, like Tank Dell. However, it wasn't on my bingo card that Cartavius was the real name, and so that raises the obvious question: if you have a name like Cartavius, why in the world are you choosing something like Tank? Is still an epic name. Tank Bigsby, great running back name, but Cartavius Bigsby is an all-time elite name. Choosing to go away from that's an L. Like I'm out. That's a red flag for me for the character of the player, frankly. From a fantasy perspective, I have questions now. That's a concern for me.
And that's going to do it for our news section today.
All right, that's JT with the news. And that is our show today. Appreciate everybody tuning in with us live. Thanks for a really nice audience today on a Sunday. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, one more preseason game, and then we get to the real stuff. Oh my goodness, I'm so ready. For us to just be, I'm getting very antsy at this point. It is time. I think we're just 3 weeks away now from regular season play, which is super exciting. Can't wait for September. A couple of things before you guys go. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on social media at Hot Read Pod, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. You'll get great content from us there. Appreciate it. Pretty boy, great show in the comments. Thank you, man. Appreciate all that you do supporting our stuff. We've partnered with Zen Sports, by the way. We continue to shout this out. But Zen Sportsbook, guys, sign up with our code HOTPOD, HOTPOD, with Zen Sportsbook, the newest betting opportunity here in the state of Tennessee. If you're a Tennessee resident and you like to sports bet like we do, and boy, oh boy, I'm starting to, this past week, I've just started to dust off my betting acumen, but listening to a lot of betting shows, getting up to date on some off-season bets, some full-season bets, figuring out who I like this season, who I don't, just kind of dusting the chops off, getting ready for the best bet gauntlet to be back in full swing. We'll be doing that with Zen Sportsbook this season. Use code HOTPOD when you sign up with them on their app, where you can get wherever you get your applications on your phone. Code HOTPOD, HOTPOD. It's going to get you a 5% welcome bonus cash back in your pockets on all of your betting volume. JT, do you have to win those bets to see 5% cash back?
No, you do not.
No, you do not. Win or lose, you get 5% cash back for the first 15 days as a thank you from Zen Sportsbook. And then after that first 15 days, you get 3% cash back on all your wins and losses of your betting volume. Just because Zen Sportsbook is awesome. And so make sure to sign up with them and do your betting with them this year to get cash back in your pocket, whether you win or lose. That's it for us. We'll be back live on Tuesday. We'll be recapping we'll be talking about the Titans' first practice of the week on Tuesday. Some other things. We might discuss some more 53-man roster revelations. Honestly, no idea. Maybe an interview. We'll see. Kind of an open book that day. Not sure what we'll be looking at, but we'll certainly be live on Tuesday afternoon, recording our Wednesday morning show. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. Have a great start to your week. We'll talk to you Tuesday.